What if the reason your prayers feel unanswered is not because you are unworthy, but because you were taught the wrong way to speak to reality? Imagine standing in front of a digital lock, crying, pleading, explaining how good you are, how much you deserve to be let in. It feels emotional, sincere, even holy, and yet the lock never moves. Not because it is cruel, but because it does not respond to emotion. It responds only to the correct code. For thousands of years, humanity has been trained to approach the divine exactly like this: begging, hoping, waiting. Religious institutions called it prayer. The ancient Gnostics called it something else entirely: forgetting. They understood that the universe is not watching to see how much you suffer. It is a system, precise and alive, waiting to be unlocked. There is a moment in the Gospel of John that quietly exposes this truth. When Jesus stands before the tomb of Lazarus, he does not kneel. He does not ask for permission. He does not say, "Please, if it is your will." Instead, he gives thanks, as if the answer has already happened. Pay attention to that. Before the dead man moves, the connection is already complete. Jesus is not begging an external God. He is acknowledging a bond that was never broken. And when he says, "Lazarus, come forth," it is not a ritual. It is a command, a correction, a direct override of the system. The ancient Gnostics believed forces existed in this world, archons, unseen wardens of consciousness, whose power depends on keeping you in the posture of a beggar. And yet, you are here, watching this, because something inside you already knows the old way stopped working. You feel the static. That static is not failure. It is the signal that you are waking up. Tonight, we do not beg. We do not plead. We remember. We call. And once you see how this works, there is no going back. Reality responds differently when you do. If you feel that quiet pull, the sense that this message was not meant for everyone, stay with me. You are closer than you think, and the line is already open. To move from hearing the call to living it, something subtle but radical has to fall away first. The idea of what a miracle is supposed to be. From the moment you were young, you were quietly taught that a miracle is an interruption, a rare moment when the universe bends its own rules just for someone special. That story sounds comforting, but it also leaves you waiting, hoping you might be chosen one day. The Gnostic way of seeing was very different, and far more unsettling. A miracle was never an exception. It was a return, a remembering, a brief moment when reality snaps back to what it was meant to be before something went wrong. Look closely at the world you move through each day. The exhaustion, the decay, the constant sense of not enough. The ancient texts whispered that this was not the original design, but a distorted copy shaped by a lesser hand, what they called the demiurge. The Gospel of Philip hints at it plainly. The world arrived through an error, not through perfection. And if that is true, then your presence here is not accidental. It is corrective. When Jesus healed the withered hand, the story can be read as something far more intimate than magic. It is the image of an inner pattern being restored, the original blueprint quietly replacing corrupted instructions, health as the natural state, brokenness as interference. This leads to a question that may already be stirring in you, even if you have never put it into words. Why does this restoration seem to happen for some and not for others? The old answer was worthiness, but the Gnostics leaned towards something more impersonal and more hopeful: resonance. Some move through this world fully identified with its surface, shaped entirely by matter and habit, like characters bound to the rules of a game. Others carry a faint but persistent signal inside them, a spark that does not belong to the system itself. If you have ever felt like this life never quite fit you, as if you were remembering something without knowing what it was, this may be why. That spark is not a reward, it is an interface, and it has been quietly waiting for you to notice it. When the call begins, it doesn't arrive as a thought or a realization. It arrives as a shift, a subtle pressure in the chest, a warmth that wasn't there a moment ago. Nothing outside of you is being convinced or negotiated with. What responds moves first through sensation, not language. Something in the body releases its guard. The breath deepens without effort. The nervous system softens, as if it has been holding tension for far too long and is finally allowed to rest. You are no longer reaching outward. You are no longer pushing words into the dark. The signal begins inside the body, where strain gives way to steadiness. Ancient stories hinted at this without explaining it. They spoke of keys and doors, but what they pointed to was a condition, not a phrase. You could repeat the right sounds forever and feel nothing change, because the doorway does not open to sound. It opens to coherence. When the body aligns, when inner noise quiets, something else steps forward. Not force, not emotion, presence. And from that presence, the rest begins to organize itself. The forces that govern this layered reality understand that very well. They cannot remove the key. They can only distract you from noticing it. And their most effective distraction has always been language. Slowly, gently, you were trained to speak like someone small. You were taught to repeat words instead of inhabiting states, to memorize prayers instead of embodying presence, to believe that power lives in the sentence, not in the one who speaks. That posture assumes you are locked inside something hostile, hoping a distant power might show mercy. But the old stories hint at a different picture. You are not a prisoner asking for scraps. You are the child of the architect, standing inside a cell that was never designed to hold you, with the key already resting in your hand. So people shout sacred phrases into the sky and feel nothing change, not because the words are wrong, but because words alone were never the door. You could stand among graves and repeat the right sounds until your throat breaks, and nothing would move, because the call is not a script you recite, it is a condition you enter. To pass through the inner firewall of this world, three currents must align at once, like keys turning together in a lock. The first is recognition. Not belief, not hope, but that sharp internal click when you realize you are not what the fear says you are. Like waking inside a nightmare and suddenly knowing you are safe in your own bed. The threat dissolves because the dream no longer owns you. That moment of clarity, felt in the body, not argued in the mind, is recognition. From there, something shifts. Authority emerges, and this is where many hesitate. They glimpse their deeper nature but still speak from habit, asking permission from the very patterns they were meant to shape. The stories show something else. Jesus did not bargain with illness or reason with the storm. He moved as one who knew his origin. Authority is not dominance, it is alignment. Matter responds naturally to the frequency that formed it, the way clay yields to the hands that shaped it. And when recognition and authority settle into place, command becomes effortless, not loud, not dramatic, almost silent. Command is simply choosing the version of reality that already agrees with truth. The scene at the tomb is not about overpowering death, it is about coherence. Origin remembered, authority assumed, command issued, the circuit closes, and in that moment, something long frozen begins to move again. Something thaws. What had been held rigid for years begins to soften. The breath reaches places it could never reach before. The chest expands without effort. Muscles loosen their grip. Even the sense of time shifts, as if the body is no longer bracing for impact. Old patterns that once felt immovable begin to relax, not because they were forced, but because they are no longer needed. Most people move through life tense without realizing it, carrying unfinished reactions in their nervous system, repeating motions that no longer serve them. This moment is different. This is where listening becomes movement, where stillness becomes change. Yet most people move through life with that circuit incomplete, wondering why nothing responds, trapped in patterns that feel familiar but lifeless. Something irreversible has already begun. This is where listening turns into doing. Not later, not someday, now. Because the greatest obstacle to the call has never been distance or unworthiness, but noise, endless noise. Thoughts pulled toward tomorrow, replaying yesterday, looping doubts and unfinished fears. The ancient stories describe this not as weakness, but as interference, a kind of deliberate static that keeps the signal fragmented. When the mind is crowded, nothing clear can pass through. So the first movement is not effort, but withdrawal. You do not wrestle the thoughts or try to silence them by force. That only feeds them. Instead, you step away. Imagine standing beside a roaring highway, cars rushing past in every direction. You could try to stop them with your hands, or you could simply turn around and walk toward the trees. The traffic keeps moving, but it no longer owns your attention. This is the disconnect, a gentle refusal to engage. Then comes a shift that feels almost physical. Most people live behind their eyes, trapped in the narrow room of the mind, mistaking the processor for the source. But the old teachings hint that the center of power is lower, deeper. Awareness begins to descend. Picture an elevator inside your head, doors closing softly as it moves downward, passing the throat, the chest, settling behind the sternum. This is not imagination for its own sake. It is relocation. Attention finds a different home. Here, something opens. The space feels wider, quieter, less crowded by identity. This is the place the stories describe as the inner chamber, not because it is grand, but because it is still. In this silence, you do not analyze who you are. You listen for what was there before labels, before history, before your name. A simple question forms without words. What was I before all of this? You do not chase an answer. You wait. And something responds, not as language, but as sensation. A warmth, a gentle vibration, a feeling of depth expanding outward. That presence has no age. It does not argue. It simply is. When it settles in, the restless energy of thought fades, replaced by a dense, steady sense of being. This is the moment the line clears. You are no longer reaching upward. You are inhabiting something that was already present. From here, sound carries weight. Breath carries intent. Words are no longer thrown outward, hoping to be heard. They rise from the center, shaped by coherence. In this state, even a quiet whisper has direction. It is not a plea. It is an acknowledgement, followed by movement. And this is where the sequence begins. Not as a performance, but as alignment, with every syllable felt in the chest, as if something ancient is finally being spoken from the inside again. From that place of quiet alignment, the words themselves are simple, almost bare, yet they carry weight because they rise from a settled center. I am here. What follows is not a demand, but a recognition of what has always been yours. Authority is not taken, it is remembered. The sense of limitation softens, not through force, but through clarity, as if a fog has lifted and you can see the room you are standing in. Alignment happens without drama. Something clicks, and then, just as quickly, you are asked to do the most difficult thing of all: let go. Imagine holding a heavy stone over a deep well. You feel its weight in your arm, the tension in your fingers. Releasing it feels risky, almost irresponsible. But you open your hand anyway. You do not follow it down. You do not lean over the edge to listen for the splash. You allow it to fall, unseen. Turning back to check, even once, anchors you to the very thing you claimed to release. Old stories warned about this not as punishment, but as consequence. Attention solidifies. What you stare at hardens. So you turn forward. And this is where the real test begins. The moment the inner command is issued, something subtle stirs. The system you move through notices the shift. The ancient language describes this as a kind of immune response. Not personal, not malicious, just automatic. When a deeper order begins to assert itself, resistance appears. It does not arrive as shadows or external threats. It sounds like your own voice. A heaviness creeps in. A familiar skepticism whispers that nothing changed, that you imagined the whole thing, that you have no right to speak this way. This is not failure. It is feedback, a sign that something registered. If you argue with these thoughts, if you chase them, you plug back into the old circuit and the current disperses. So you do something different. You watch. Like rain sliding down a window, present but unable to reach you. You name it quietly as interference and return to stillness. The movement has already begun. Trust the structure, not your mood. After the first wave passes, time stretches. This is the space many abandon the process, not because nothing is happening, but because it is happening beneath the surface. The deeper intelligence does not dispense outcomes like a machine. It builds, it reorganizes, and building requires clearing. When the inner pattern begins to overwrite old instructions, reality reflects the change in strange ways. Things loosen, structures wobble. This can feel unsettling if you do not know how to read it. The first sign is collapse. You ask for expansion, and suddenly an unexpected expense appears. You open to connection, and a relationship dissolves. This is not a refusal. It is demolition. A room must be emptied before it can be filled. Trying to rescue what is falling apart only slows the process. Let it clear. What burns becomes fuel. The second sign is resonance. Patterns emerge. Numbers repeat. Conversations echo your private thoughts. You notice answers arriving before you form the question. These are not messages to decode, but ripples, indications that the field around you is adjusting. You acknowledge them without chasing meaning, the way you might nod at a familiar face in passing. The third sign is quieter and more decisive than the others. Neutrality. The tight grip of wanting loosens. You stop measuring time. The urgency dissolves. This is not indifference. It is confidence without words. Like ordering something you know will arrive, you no longer hover at the door. You return to living. This calm is not accidental. It signals that something within you has already shifted into alignment with a different outcome. When this neutrality settles in, there is nothing left to force. The inner transmission is complete. What remains is simply the slow, ordinary miracle of time, catching up with a truth that has already been set in motion. There is a quiet reason this understanding was pushed into the shadows. Not because it was dangerous, but because it made certain structures unnecessary. When a person realizes they can reach the source directly, the space between them and the sacred collapses. No interpreter is required. No one needs to measure their worth or grant permission. The only movement is inward, toward remembrance. Systems of control, whether spiritual or unseen, draw their strength from the same place. The belief that you are small, accidental, and alone in an unfriendly world. That belief keeps you searching outside yourself for approval and rescue. But each time you sense that deeper connection awaken, something shifts. The world stops feeling rigid. Circumstances soften. Life begins to respond in subtle ways, as if listening. This does not make you special in the way you were taught to crave. It makes you responsible. It invites you to see reality as something alive, something that answers coherence rather than desperation. And now, whether you fully trust it yet or not, you are no longer empty-handed. You are holding a set of keys, and what matters next is not belief, but what you choose to do with that awareness. What if none of this was about being right or wrong, but about noticing what quietly stirred inside you while listening? If something here resonated, or even unsettled you, you're welcome to share that reflection below as part of an ongoing conversation, not a conclusion. And if this exploration feels like a path you'd like to walk slowly, with curiosity rather than certainty, you may choose to stay connected through a like or by subscribing. We'll continue unfolding these ideas together at a human pace, one question at a time.